All right, let's jump into some wild cybersecurity news from September 2024. We've got stories ranging from international espionage all the way to some good old-fashioned financial fraud. We'll be unpacking weekly security updates, and we have some expert commentary for you too. So we're not just going to give you the headlines, but we really want to help you understand the bigger trends that are at play here. By the end of this deep dive, you'll be in the know about all the latest cybersecurity happenings, and you'll also have a deeper understanding of what it all means,
Yeah.
for you personally.
And that's the key, isn't it? It's not just about knowing what happened, but understanding why it matters and what we can learn from it.
Exactly. So let's just jump right in with a story that sounds like it's straight out of a spy thriller, the Hezbollah pager attack.
Oh yeah, this one really caught my eye. So we're not just talking about a cyber attack that disrupts systems. This attack caused physical harm. Reports are indicating 12 deaths and thousands injured from pagers that were rigged to explode simultaneously.
Exploding pagers. It sounds like something out of a Mission Impossible movie, but with real-world consequences. This makes you wonder, what if this was just a test run? Could we see these types of attacks being used more frequently in future conflicts?
It's a chilling thought,
Yeah.
and it really highlights that evolving nature of cyber warfare. It's no longer just about stealing data or disrupting services. It's about causing real-world damage and potentially loss of life.
And this attack raises a lot of questions about supply chain security. How were these pagers compromised? How were explosives embedded without detection?
These are the questions that intelligence agencies are grappling with right now. It's a wake-up call for all of us to think about the devices we rely on every single day.
Mm.
Could they be vulnerable to a similar attack? And what are the broader societal implications of this type of technology being weaponized?
It's a lot to think about. And it's a reminder that cybersecurity is not just an IT issue anymore. It's a matter of national security and even personal safety. We've seen these cyber-physical attacks before, like the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, which caused fuel shortages on the East Coast, and Stuxnet, which targeted Iran's nuclear program.
But neither of those resulted in physical casualties like this Hezbollah incident. So we're seeing this escalation in the potential impact of these attacks, which makes understanding and mitigating them even more crucial.
Okay, let's shift gears to something that might hit closer to home for some of our listeners. Government regulations and compliance. Specifically, the CMMC regulations that are coming down the pipeline for Department of Defense and Department of Education contractors.
CMMC stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Keeping your systems safe is super important as businesses rely more and more on digital systems, and that's where turnkey cybersecurity can really help.
Yeah, we're here to help small businesses just like yours make sure they're safe and sound in this crazy world of cybersecurity. And we offer a whole suite of services specifically tailored for you. So that's ensuring CMMC compliance and doing penetration testing. We also run vulnerability scans, and we can help you develop a comprehensive risk assessment.
And it doesn't stop there, right?
No, it doesn't.
We handle incident response, should the unfortunate happen, and we guide you through migrations like GCC. We just want to make sure your transitions are smooth and that you're secure.
It's all about peace of mind, right? You focus on what you do best, running your business, and we'll make sure that your digital world is safe and sound.
Imagine you're a company and you're working with the Department of Defense. Suddenly, you have all these new regulations that you have to comply with, or you risk losing contracts. It's a lot of pressure.
And the consequences of non-compliance are getting increasingly serious.
Right.
I mean, we saw that play out in the Georgia Tech case,
Right.
where the university is facing a lawsuit for misrepresenting its cybersecurity practices.
Exactly. Georgia Tech is being sued under the False Claims Act,
Hmm.
which is basically a way for the government to recover funds when companies or individuals lie about what they're doing, especially when it comes to government contracts.
So in Georgia Tech's case, they claimed they were doing things to protect sensitive data that they weren't actually doing.
That's the gist of it, yeah. And what's interesting here is that the lawsuit was triggered by a whistleblower, a former employee who refused to sign off on the university's claims. Whistleblowers often have firsthand knowledge of these kinds of situations, and the False Claims Act incentivizes them to come forward.
So they can get a reward if the government recovers money. That's interesting.
Yes, they get a percentage of the recovered funds. And for companies that are found in violation, the financial and reputational damage can be severe. It's a huge risk for them, even beyond any fines and penalties they might face.
This really highlights the importance of cybersecurity due diligence. Even if you're not a government contractor, it makes you think about who you're trusting with your data. We need to be proactive about protecting our own privacy. And holding companies accountable.
Absolutely. And speaking of holding companies accountable, let's talk about that FTC report,
Yeah.
exposing massive surveillance of kids and teens by social media giants.
This was a big one. The FTC investigated companies like Amazon, which owns Twitch, Meta, which owns Facebook and WhatsApp, YouTube, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, Discord, Reddit, basically all the major platforms.
It's about 4 years investigating this, and the report is pretty damning. It reveals how these companies are essentially monetizing the personal data of millions of Americans, including children and teenagers. They were collecting data on kids' online activity, their interests, their location, even their facial features in some cases.
And then using that information to target them with ads, it's just so unethical. It's frustrating because there seems to be a lack of action from Congress to really regulate these powerful platforms.
That's one of the biggest challenges. These companies are incredibly influential, and their lobbying efforts are powerful. It's difficult to get meaningful legislation passed. This raises a really tough question for you. As someone who uses these platforms, where do we draw the line?
Exactly. How much access to our data are we willing to trade for the convenience and connectivity of social media? And what can we do individually or collectively to push for more responsible data practices? It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but the conversation needs to happen.
We need to be talking about the long-term consequences of growing up in a world of constant surveillance, the ethical implications of data collection, and how to empower individuals to control their own data.
All right, let's move on to some other notable breaches and security updates from September. There was a lot going on, so we'll try to hit the highlights quickly. First up, that sonic wall bug that was being actively exploited by hackers.
The lack of multi-factor authentication was a major factor in those breaches. It's a great example of how even seemingly secure systems can be vulnerable if basic security measures aren't in place.
And then there is that Russian influence operation using RT, their state-controlled media outlet, to spread disinformation. They were even paying U.S.-based media influencers to amplify their propaganda.
This highlights the increasing sophistication and reach of nation-state actors in the cyber domain. They're using social media, traditional media, even financial incentives to manipulate public opinion and sow discord.
It's scary how much influence they can have, especially in this age of information overload, where it can be hard to discern fact from fiction. Critical thinking and media literacy are more important than ever.
Absolutely. And then we have the Port of Seattle refusing to pay a ransom after a ransomware attack and warning of a potential data leak. That's got to be a tough call.
Yeah, do you pay the ransom
Mm-hmm.
and potentially encourage more attacks? Or do you stand your ground and risk the consequences?
It's a difficult decision. And there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Each case needs to be evaluated on its own merits.
Definitely. It's a reminder that we need to think about the potential consequences of our actions in the digital world, just like we do in the physical world. And finally, there was that research about vulnerabilities in baseband radios, which are the radios that are built into our phones.
This was fascinating. Baseband radios are responsible for all the wireless communication in our phones. And these vulnerabilities could allow attackers to compromise phone security, even if the phone itself is considered secure.
So even if you think you've taken all the necessary precautions, there could still be vulnerabilities lurking beneath the surface.
Exactly. It affects multiple radio chip makers and phone manufacturers, so it's a widespread issue. It highlights how interconnected and complex the cybersecurity landscape has become. We tend to think of our phones as being relatively secure, but this research shows that even the underlying hardware can be a point of vulnerability.
It's like finding out that the foundation of your house is built on quicksand. It's unsettling.
It certainly is. And it highlights the need for constant vigilance, for staying informed about the latest threats, and for taking proactive steps to protect ourselves.
Welcome back. We've uncovered some pretty intense cybersecurity issues so far, but there's more to explore. Are you ready to dive back in?
Always. There's never a dull moment in the world of cybersecurity. Let's talk about something that might seem a bit more familiar. Online scams. Specifically the case of a Tennessee school district that lost $3 million to something called money mules.
Money mules. That sounds like something straight out of a gangster movie.
It does have a bit of an underworld feel, doesn't it? Basically, these are individuals who are recruited, sometimes unknowingly, to transfer stolen money for criminal organizations. They might be asked to open bank accounts, receive wire transfers, or even convert funds into cryptocurrency.
So in this case, the school district ended up sending millions of dollars to these individuals who were acting as middlemen for the criminals.
Exactly. And it highlights how cybercrime isn't always about fancy hacking techniques. It's often about exploiting human vulnerabilities, like trust, or even just the desire to help someone out. The school district probably thought they were dealing with a legitimate vendor or contractor.
It's a reminder that we all need to be careful about who we trust online and offline. Did the money mules get in trouble?
Absolutely. Even if they were unaware of the criminal scheme,
Yeah.
they could still face felony charges. It's a reminder that ignorance of the law is no excuse, especially when it comes to financial transactions.
Okay, let's talk about something that's relevant to students, parents, and anyone who's ever filled out a FAFSA form. The Department of Education is proposing new rules for protecting student financial aid data.
This is an interesting development. You see, student data, like the information you provide on your FAFSA, or student loan applications, is now considered Controlled Unclassified Information, or CUI.
Wait, so my AFSA information is now considered sensitive government data.
That's right. And it's part of a larger government effort to standardize cybersecurity practices and protect sensitive data. These rules are going to have a big impact on colleges and universities.
So they're going to have to beef up their cybersecurity to protect this information.
Exactly. They're going to need to implement more robust cybersecurity measures, and that requires time, resources, and expertise. A lot of universities might not be ready for this.
And if they don't comply, what happens?
There could be serious consequences, financial penalties, loss of government funding, and reputational damage.
Okay, before we dive back into the world of data breaches, let's talk about something positive. Craig Newmark, the founder of Craigslist, is donating $100 million to strengthen U.S. cybersecurity.
That's fantastic news. Newmark has been a long-time advocate for cybersecurity and has donated hundreds of billions of dollars to various causes.
So what's he planning to do with this $100 million?
He's focusing on two key areas. First, he wants to protect critical infrastructure, like power grids and transportation systems, from attacks by foreign governments. Second, he wants to educate people about cyber hygiene, the basic practices we should all be following to protect ourselves online.
It's encouraging to see someone with his resources stepping up to address these challenges. Okay, let's get back to the less than positive news data breaches. First up, Slim CD, a company that routes credit card transactions between stores and banks.
Slim CD suffered a breach last August, but they didn't discover it until June of this year. And they're only now starting to notify the 1.7 million people affected.
Wait, they waited over a year to tell people their data might have been compromised. Why the delay?
It's certainly concerning. And to make matters worse, they're not offering any credit monitoring or other forms of assistance to those who are impacted.
Wow, that seems pretty irresponsible, especially considering the sensitive nature of the data they handle. What about Highline Public Schools in Washington State? They had to close all their schools after a cyber attack.
That's right. It happened on the first day of school for kindergartners. Of all days. The attack disrupted internet access, so teachers couldn't access lesson plans, students couldn't complete assignments, and the whole system was thrown into chaos.
Talk about bad timing.
It highlights how disruptive these attacks can be, impacting not just the immediate target, but the entire community. And as our reliance on technology grows, so too does our vulnerability to these types of disruptions. Speaking of disruptions, remember the London Transit Agency?
Yeah, they initially claimed that no customer data was taken in that cyber attack, but it turned out that wasn't true.
Exactly. They've since admitted that customer data was compromised, but they're still being vague about the details.
So yet another case of a company downplaying the severity of a breach. It makes you wonder, are they trying to protect their reputation, or are they just trying to avoid taking responsibility? Okay, moving on to Avis, the rental car company. They lost data on 300,000 customers.
The interesting thing about the Avis breach is that the hackers were only in their system for 4 days before being detected. That suggests they have decent security monitoring in place.
So at least they caught it relatively quickly.
Yes. But the fact that the hackers were still able to get away with so much data in such a short time is concerning.
It's a reminder that no system is completely impenetrable. There's always going to be someone out there trying to find a way in. Okay, 2 more big breaches to discuss. First up, Fortinet, a major cybersecurity company.
Oh, this one's a bit ironic, isn't it? A cybersecurity company getting hacked. And to make matters worse, the attackers are now selling 440 gigabytes of data on the dark web.
It just goes to show even the companies that are supposed to be the experts in cybersecurity are vulnerable to attacks. What happened?
It seems like Fortinet stored data on a cloud storage provider without adequate security measures in place. It highlights how cloud security is becoming increasingly important. It's not enough to just trust your cloud provider. You need to make sure you're taking steps to protect your own data.
It's a shared responsibility. Okay, last but not least, TD Bank.
They were fined $28 million for sending incorrect data to credit bureaus.
What do you mean by incorrect data?
They were reporting accounts as being delinquent or bankrupt when they weren't.
Wow. That could have a devastating impact on people's credit scores.
Absolutely. And it seems like they didn't do much to rectify the situation when people complained, which is why they ended up facing such a hefty fine.
It's a reminder that data breaches don't always involve malicious hackers. Sometimes it's just a matter of human error, negligence, or poor data management practices. It's about accountability. Companies need to take responsibility for their mistakes and take steps to prevent them from happening again. So, are you ready for the final round of cybersecurity news?
Bring it on. We've covered a lot of ground, but there are a few more fascinating stories to explore in our final segment.
We've talked about nation-states and hackers and even those accidental data leaks, but now let's step into the world of cryptocurrency, because it seems that even former presidents can't resist the allure of digital assets.
You're talking about Trump's new crypto venture, right? Launching just 2 months before the election, it definitely raised some eyebrows.
It wasn't a huge surprise given his, past interest in crypto, but the details or the lack thereof are what's really got people talking.
Yeah, it's all a bit vague. We know 20% of the tokens are going to the founders, likely including Trump himself, and the rest are being sold publicly. But there's a catch. Only accredited investors, meaning those deemed wealthy and knowledgeable, are allowed to buy in.
That definitely makes you wonder about the motives behind this whole thing. Some people are saying it's just another attempt to capitalize on his name and his influence, especially after the whole debacle with the DJT token.
Oh yeah, remember that one? Let's just say it didn't end well for a lot of investors. This new venture is raising similar concerns. Lack of transparency, potential for manipulation, and the risk of a rug pull, where the founders cash out and leave investors holding worthless tokens.
It's a good reminder that the crypto world is still like the Wild West, largely unregulated, full of opportunities for both incredible gains and devastating losses. Buyer beware, as they say. Speaking of cautionary tales, let's circle back to the Port of Seattle. They refused to pay the ransom after that ransomware attack, and now they're warning of a potential data leak.
It's a tough situation. Paying the ransom encourages more attacks, and it doesn't guarantee the return of your data. But refusing to pay could mean that sensitive information ends up in the wrong hands. And in this case, the Port of Seattle runs the SeaTac airport, so a data leak could have a huge impact.
It really highlights the difficult choices that organizations face when dealing with ransomware. It's not just about the money, it's about the potential damage to reputation, operations, and even national security.
Exactly. It underscores the need for strong cybersecurity defenses from the start, robust backups, incident response plans, and employee training to prevent attacks in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack this research on baseband radio vulnerabilities. This one sounds pretty technical.
It is, but it's important. Think of the baseband radio as the heart of your phone's communication system. It's responsible for connecting to cell towers, Wi-Fi networks, Bluetooth devices, basically anything wireless.
So what's the issue?
Researchers have discovered vulnerabilities that could allow attackers to compromise the baseband radio, potentially gaining access to sensitive data, or even taking control of the device.
And this isn't limited to just one type of phone or brand, right?
Correct. It affects multiple radio chip makers and phone manufacturers, making it a widespread issue. It's a wake-up call that even devices we consider secure can have hidden vulnerabilities. It's a constant race to stay ahead of the attackers.
So after diving deep into all this cybersecurity news, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? What should they be thinking about?
Well, it's clear that the cybersecurity landscape is getting more complex every day. We're seeing this convergence of physical and digital threats, nation-states getting involved, and our increasing reliance on technology, which is a double-edged sword. It brings convenience, but it also creates new vulnerabilities.
It's a lot to take in. Should we all just unplug and go live off the grid?
That's one way to go, but for most of us, it's not realistic. The key is to be informed and proactive. Stay up to date on the latest threats, understand how they work, and take steps to protect yourself. But it's not just about individual responsibility. We need to hold companies and governments accountable for protecting our data and building secure systems.
It's a collective effort. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, from individuals to organizations to government.
Exactly. We need to work together to create a safer and more resilient digital world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one question you'd like our listeners to ponder?
I'd ask them to consider this. In an increasingly interconnected world where technology shapes every aspect of our lives, what does true digital security look like? And how can we as individuals, organizations, and as a society work together to achieve it?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. It's something we all need to be thinking about as we navigate this ever-evolving digital landscape. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. We hope you found it informative, engaging, and thought-provoking.
Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.